You need to scan the barcodes on the side, not the bottom, because the system keeps flagging the weight as an error. I didn't look up from the screen. My hands moved in a practiced, mechanical rhythm, pushing the kale and the overpriced, pre-marinated chicken breasts across the scanner. The teenager behind the counter, a kid with a patchy mustache and a name tag that said Caleb, stared at me, his fingers hovering over the touchscreen. The fluorescent lights in here always gave me a headache, that specific buzzing hum that vibrated right behind my eyes. Sorry, he muttered, finally shifting the bag of coffee beans. I leaned against the partition, feeling the exhaustion of the last 2 hours. Standing on the sideline at the soccer fields in Ashburn had been a special kind of misery. It was 34 degrees. The wind whipped off the retention pond. And Michael had spent the entire game pacing behind the bleachers, talking into his phone. He claimed it was a conference call with someone in Singapore. But he didn't wear his Bluetooth earpiece. He just held the phone to his ear, his shoulder hunched up, blocking the wind. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I fished it out, checking the notification. It was a push alert for our joint credit card. Usually these were just mundane updates. The monthly insurance premium, the gas station near his office, or the inevitable, crushing minimum payment for the home equity line of credit we'd opened to fix the roof last fall. I tapped the notification. A charge from a hotel, the Marriott in Tyson's Corner. $280. My thumb hovered over the screen. Tyson's was 20 minutes from our house. It wasn't exactly a business travel destination for Michael. He worked in Arlington, in one of those glass and steel boxes that looked exactly like every other glass and steel box along the Beltway corridor. If he had a meeting in Tyson's, he would have just driven there. Ma'am, that's $62.40. I looked at the cashier. He looked young, tired, and completely oblivious to the fact that I was currently trying to map out a 20-minute drive in my head. 1 second, I said. I tapped the transaction details. The charge hit yesterday at 4 in the afternoon. A Thursday. Thursday was the day Michael always claimed he had to stay late for the weekly synchronization sync. A phrase he used so often it had lost all meaning. Did you want the receipt in the bag? I pulled my card out, my movements sharp and jerky. No. Just leave it. Walking out to the parking lot, the wind hit me again, colder than before. The DC sprawl felt particularly oppressive tonight. Every car in the lot looked expensive, polished, and strained, just like everything else in our zip code. I found our SUV, shoved the groceries into the trunk, and sat in the driver's seat for a full minute before starting the engine. My phone buzzed again. A text from Michael. Traffic on the 495 is a nightmare. Near the American Legion Bridge. Might be late for the dinner at your sister's. I stared at the screen. The American Legion Bridge. He was heading north, away from the city. Tyson's was south. It didn't make sense, but it was exactly the kind of vague half-truth he'd been feeding me for months. I didn't reply. I just put the car in reverse and backed out, catching the edge of the cart return with my rear bumper. The crunch was sickeningly loud in the quiet lot. I didn't get out to check the damage. I just drove home. The next morning, Mrs. Gable from next door was already out by the curb when I pulled the bins in. She didn't say hello. She just looked at my bumper, then at me, and asked if we were planning on hiring a contractor to fix the driveway drainage. Since our runoff was apparently pooling near her landscaping, I told her I'd look into it and went inside. She clearly knew I'd hit something, but she only cared about her mulch. I checked our family calendar on the fridge. The dinner at my sister's was gone. I'd missed it. I didn't even remember the drive back from the grocery store. Just the realization that the next 3 weekends were packed with mandatory office retreats and soccer tournaments that I now had to manage alone. When Michael finally emerged from the bedroom, he looked crisp. His tie perfectly knotted. He didn't mention the dinner. He grabbed his briefcase and checked his watch. I need you to sign these tax forms before you go to work, he said, sliding a stack of paper across the island. I'm heading out early to beat the traffic. I looked at the papers. They were standard, but my eyes caught a folder underneath. It was a receipt from the Marriott. Not the one from the credit card app, but a paper copy. It was dated yesterday. You were in Tyson's yesterday, I said, my voice flat. His hand on the door handle. I told you, I had a client lunch near the Galleria. Why? The receipt is for a room, Michael. Not lunch. He didn't blink. He just adjusted his briefcase and sighed. It was a conference room rental for the afternoon. Everything is expensive in Tyson's, you know that. Are you going to sign the forms or not? He didn't wait for an answer. He walked out, and the garage door rumbled shut. I stood there, holding a pen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I looked at the receipts, then at the pile of unpaid utility bills on the counter. I didn't sign anything. I just took a photo of the hotel receipt and sent it to my sister, then deleted the text thread. I needed to call the bank to see if I could freeze the HELOC, but that would mean explaining why to a customer service rep who didn't care. I sat down and started a list of what I actually owned versus what we owed, and realized I didn't even know the password to our primary mortgage portal anymore. Using a throwaway account, because Michael monitors my Reddit activity, I'm spiraling. Silence filled the house. Schindler tax forms lay scattered across the desk while I stared at the numbers, trying to ignore the nausea rising in my throat. Michael entered the mudroom, grabbing his keys with quick, jagged movements. He avoided my gaze, focusing instead on his coat sleeves. What now, Tracy? His voice scraped against the quiet, thin and sharp. He glared at the garage door as if expecting it to retract on its own. The mortgage portal, I said, my voice betraying me with a tremor. The password isn't working. I tried the usual ones. Turning to face me, he wore an expression of profound exhaustion, as if my presence were a physical weight. I changed it for security. Phishing emails have been flooding the office, Tracy. It's a nightmare. I'll send it to you later. I'm already running late. Pointing to the stack of bills on the counter, I pressed on. I just wanted to check the utility autopay. The water bill is past due again. He exhaled, a harsh, jagged sound of pure irritation. I'm stressed, okay? Work is a disaster. Stop obsessing over the damn password. I'll give it to you tonight. He didn't wait for a response. The garage door ground open with a metallic shriek and he vanished. Standing there in the sudden quiet, I felt hollow. The final notices for the water, electric, and trash companies glared up at me from the counter. Though the amounts weren't astronomical, they signaled a collapse of our credit. My phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Gable next door. Tracy, can you or Michael move the SUV? The lawn guys can't get around the bumper damage and it's an eyesore. Ignoring the message, I watched her through the window as she stalked her lawn like a predator. I ducked behind the curtains. A deep, sick dread made moving the car feel impossible. I couldn't bear to look at that scrape again. Moving to the kitchen desk, I opened my laptop. Knowing the mortgage portal was a dead end, I bypassed it and clicked into the shared office files. Michael calls his engine room. Spreadsheets and pivot tables filled the screen, a nonsensical maze until I clicked a folder marked Miscellaneous Q3. A list of PDFs greeted me. These weren't business receipts. They were invoices for a storage unit in Sterling. I opened the most recent one, dated 2 weeks ago. The document detailed a 10 by 10 unit rental. Why would we rent storage in Sterling? Our garage and basement already overflowed with junk. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read the address. It sat in an industrial park, miles from his office, buried deep in the shadows of the airport. I reached for my phone to call my sister, but stopped. How could I explain my morning spent digging through his digital trash? Searching our shared email yielded nothing. The calendar stood equally blank. Pacing the kitchen, I felt the walls closing in. The thought of driving into Beltway traffic for soccer snacks felt like a physical impossibility. I returned to the garage to inspect the SUV. The jagged, ugly scar on the bumper looked worse than before. My phone buzzed again, a bank alert. Your HELOC balance is below the minimum threshold. Please contact your branch. Pressing my forehead against the cold concrete of the garage wall, I ignored the notification. I didn't want options. I wanted the truth about the money. Retrieving the Marriott receipt from yesterday, I studied the handwritten note in the margin. 5:15 p.m. He claimed to be stuck on the American Legion Bridge at that time. Checking the map, I saw the impossibility of the lie. The commute from Tyson's to the bridge takes 15 minutes on a clear day, but at 5:15 on a Thursday? That bridge turns into a parking lot. He couldn't have finished a meeting in Tyson's at 4 and reached the bridge by 5:15. I grabbed a notepad and started a list. Bad luck, I told myself. Just a coincidence. I clung to the idea that he was as overwhelmed as I was. A blue light blinked on the microwave. I hadn't set it. Yanking the door open, I found nothing inside. My hands shook as I grabbed my keys. Ignoring Mrs. Gable, I backed the car out of the driveway. I didn't turn toward the grocery store. I turned toward Sterling. Orange construction barrels blurred past as I steered toward Sterling, fighting off aggressive lane changers. My grip tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Each pothole sent a violent rattle through the damaged bumper. A mocking reminder of my negligence. I left the radio off. Coffee, spilled 3 days ago, clung to the air inside the cabin. Reaching the industrial park near noon, I surveyed the rows of low-slung, beige metal buildings. Weeds choked the chain-link fences surrounding the complex. I found Unit B14 and guided the SUV into a patch of gravel. The tires crunched against the stones. Walking to the roll-up door, I expected a locked barrier. Instead, the handle moved freely, and the padlock dangled by a single link. My stomach lurched. I pulled the handle, and the door groaned upward, exposing the interior to harsh gray daylight. Empty space greeted me. No furniture, no college memorabilia, no secret stash of toys. Only paper remained, thousands of pages filling plastic crates, each labeled with unrecognizable names. Ozone and trapped heat hung in the air. A laptop sat on a small folding table in the center, its first screen glowing with a ledger of misery. I flipped through the pages. Debt collection notices, judgments, and legal warnings filled every sheet, all addressed to Michael Vasquez. None concerned our house or our car. Blue Horizon Consulting and Verkink Holdings glared back at me, shell companies I had never heard of. Collapsing onto a plastic crate, I let the reality sink into my bones. The mistress wasn't a woman. It was a man named Brian Green. I spotted his name at the bottom of a legal document, the signature bold and aggressive. Brian Green, lead investigator for a private debt recovery firm, had spent 6 months tracking Michael. That Marriott receipt from Tyson's? A desperate failed attempt to negotiate a settlement. Michael wasn't cheating. He was bankrupt. He had borrowed money against fake business entities, now collapsing under the weight of interest and lawsuits. So, my phone buzzed, the screen glitching as a notification appeared. Michael's text arrived 3 minutes ago. Where are you? The neighbor asked why you haven't moved the trash cans yet. Ignoring the message, I snapped photos of the documents. My fingers flew across the screen, capturing the ledger, the names, and the staggering amounts of debt that would erase our life in this zip code. Hollow, terrifying numbness replaced my anger. Reaching for my purse, I fumbled. My phone slipped from sweaty fingers and clattered onto the concrete. A spiderweb of light spread across the glass. I picked it up, praying for function, and watched the display flicker before stabilizing. Escape felt necessary. If Michael checked the unit on his way home, he might discover my intrusion. I stood, my legs heavy as lead, and surveyed the unit one last time. Mundane, ordinary piles of paper. No cinematic betrayal, just the closing net of a man named Brian Green. I shoved the door down. It slammed into the concrete with a hollow thud echoing through the parking lot. Driving back toward the Beltway, I ignored the missed dinner and the neighbors watching for signs of trouble. Thoughts of the HELOC and utility bills crowded my mind. We lacked enough cash for a single mortgage payment, let alone the incoming legal fees. I pulled into a gas station, my hands trembling while I attempted to log into our bank app. The password failed. He had changed it again. Staring at the dashboard, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Pale, tired, and out of time. I opened my messages and started a new thread to a lawyer I'd found months ago. Typing became a reflex. I have the documents. How do I protect my half of the house? Sending the message, I turned the car toward home. I needed to arrive before him. I had to unlock the front door, walk into that kitchen, and act like the ledger didn't exist. Like our life wasn't a debt-fueled hallucination. Red brake lights stretched out before me, a wall of steel and frustration. I sat in the lane, watching the clock. Michael's phone buzzed again. I'm heading back now. Don't forget, we have that family brunch on Sunday. We need to look like we have our act together. I remained silent. Leaning my head against the headrest, I watched the cars crawl forward, inch by agonizing inch. I checked my bag for my spare key, only to realize I'd left it in the kitchen drawer. I was locked out of my own life, and he was coming home to find me waiting on the porch. Traffic on the 495 inner loop sat frozen. Red tail lights pulsed in a stagnant rhythmic flow. Staring at the back of a truck, I felt a throb in my temples matching the blinker of the car to my left. My phone lay on the passenger seat, its screen flickering with every glitchy bank notification. Unauthorized login attempts pinged my screen one after another. Somewhere, he sat in a parked car, sweating over a laptop to move non-existent money toward a man named Brian Green. Avoiding the urge to call or text back about brunch, I shifted the car into park and watched the minutes crawl across the digital dash. 3:45 p.m. Reaching our suburb meant walking into his practiced ritual of the happy couple for the neighbors. Pulling into the driveway, I saw his sedan angled to block the mailbox. The house looked exactly as it had that morning, beige, siding, and overgrown hydrangeas framing the entrance. He stood by the front door with his phone pressed to his ear. Spotting me, he shifted his expression from frantic irritation to a practiced, weary calm. Remaining in the car, I watched him through the windshield. He gestured at his watch and pointed toward the front door, clearly assuming I had simply been late with the milk from the grocery store. Stepping out, I felt my legs heavy as lead pipes. The air carried the scent of cut grass and impending rain. "Where have you been?" He didn't wait for me to reach the step. Keeping his voice to a hushed, sharp whisper to avoid the neighbors, he added, "Gable was out here twice. She asked about the HOA meeting tonight. I told her you were tied up with." I was in Sterling. He stopped mid-sentence. His hand reaching for his keys went rigid. "What are you talking about?" "There's nothing in Sterling." "I found the unit, Michael." Silence hung heavy between us. He refused to meet my gaze, staring instead at the neighbor's trash cans before dropping his eyes to his own shoes. His posture slumped. The starch in his shirt suddenly lost all structure. He started, his voice a low, raspy wheeze. "Look, it's complicated. It's not what you think." I was trying to protect. "I saw the ledger," I interrupted. "I saw Brian Green's name. I know about the shell companies." A quick, involuntary jerk of his shoulder betrayed his wince. "Honestly, you don't understand the liability. If I hadn't taken those lines of credit, we would lost everything months ago. It was a bridge. It was just a bridge to keep us afloat until the Q4 projections hit. It's just paperwork, Tracy. It's just math. It's fraud, Michael." He let out a short, hollow laugh and rubbed the back of his neck. "It's aggressive accounting. There's a difference. We have a brunch to attend on Sunday. My boss is going to be there. We have to look like we have our act together, or the whole thing goes under. If the bank gets wind of a domestic dispute, they'll trigger the acceleration clause on the mortgage. You know that. You know how this works." Reaching for the door handle, he found me standing between him and the wood. I carried the documents in my bag. Physical evidence of his aggressive accounting, capable of landing us both in a legal wood chipper. Of the house, the equity we fought for, and our false social standing crowded my mind. "I'm not going to brunch." He stared at me, his eyes darting to the street to check for onlookers. "Don't be dramatic. You're tired. You're stressed. Go inside, take a shower, and we can talk about the budget tonight." "The lawyer is already drafting the protective filing," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not a signatory on Blue Horizon. I'm not touching your debt. But I am filing for a separation of assets starting tomorrow morning." "Pale," he stammered. "You can't. If you do that, it triggers an audit. They'll look at the house. They'll look at the joint accounts. You'll lose the house. You'll lose everything." I lost everything the second you started signing my name to those shell companies." Refusing to wait for his argument, I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope prepared at the gas station. The notarized affidavit documenting my findings sat in my hand, signed and witnessed by the clerk at the UPS store. I pressed it into his chest. When he failed to take it, the paper slid down and hit the porch mat with a soft thud. He stared at the document as if it were a venomous insect. "You're making a mistake. I'm making a record." Turning my back on him, I bypassed the front door. The side door to the mudroom stood unlocked. Walking past him, I felt my heart hammer against my ribs. He didn't follow. He stood on the porch, a man in a crisp suit, clutching his own destruction, while the neighbor's sprinklers clicked on, spraying a fine mist across the driveway. Stepping into the kitchen, I locked the mudroom door behind me. I cleared the stack of overdue utility bills into the trash and pulled a heavy-duty permanent marker and a roll of duct tape from the junk drawer. Moving to the hallway, I taped the edges of the master bedroom door, not to keep him out, but to signal the end of our shared space. My hands shook with such violence that I had to press my palms flat against the wall to steady them. The front door opened and closed behind me. He was inside, pacing. His ragged, uneven breath echoed on the other side of the wall. He stopped in the hallway. "Tracy?" I didn't answer. Returning to the kitchen, I picked up the phone and dialed the number for our homeowner's insurance. I listened to the cheerful, looping piano melody of the hold music. "Yes," I told the automated voice when it requested my policy number. "I need to report a claim, not for the house. For the title." Leaning against the counter, I closed my eyes and listened to the hum of the refrigerator. Michael paced the hallway, his footsteps slowing until they stopped entirely. He waited for me to emerge and fix it. He waited for me to make it all look normal again. I reached into the pantry for a box of heavy-duty garbage bags, folding them into neat, precise squares on the counter. I kept every movement slow and deliberate. The anger had vanished, replaced by an icy clarity. I grabbed the marker and wrote VZ, personal, on the first bag, then began pulling clothes from the laundry pile, dropping them in one by one. "Thank you so much, Tracy, for trusting us with your story. It is truly heartbreaking to realize that the mistress you feared was actually a web of financial ruin woven by your own husband." Dealing with the fallout of Michael's choices and the pressure of a man like Brian Greene is an unimaginable burden to carry. We're all rooting for you as you navigate this separation and fight to protect your future. To our listeners, I want to hear your take on this. Tracy chose to immediately file for a separation of assets and document the fraud, even knowing it might risk their home and social standing. Do you believe she made the right move by blowing the whistle now? Or should she have tried to negotiate with Michael behind closed doors to save their assets first? Please leave your advice and thoughts for Tracy in the comments section below. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new confession. We'll be back soon with another story that you won't want to miss. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.